Welcome back to the May Toys of, and the first week of Pride Month 2026. In order to celebrate Pride, every episode of the May Toys of for the next month will be dedicated to characters who are part of the LGBTQ+ community. And we are starting with one of the sleeper hits of the Seekers, and one of the most requested Seekers in my queue. It's time for the May Toys of Acid Storm. Before we begin, a big thank you to 0H00C Ultra, Neo Pro Gamer PL312, Transformers Tai Stop Motion, Von Lock 67, The Sandwich Man 108, Jennifer Silva Rodriguez 5552, and Doug Fernan 276. Thank you all so much for recommending Acid Storm today. Acid Storm has had an incredibly unique path in terms of a Transformers character. Nowadays, he's incredibly prominent. Every time we get a Starscream, it's a pretty safe bet that we're going to get an Acid Storm. In fact, sometimes we get Acid Storm before we even get Skywarp and Thundercracker. But that's these days. Back in 1984, he was just a nameless Seeker. He showed up in Divide and Conquer, and that was about it. No lines, no identification. We didn't even get any type of name for this group. These days, we recognize them as the Rainmakers. But back then, they just seemed fairly generic. So generic that they don't even have the proper color scheme. Look at them. They don't have the usual color layout of the Seekers. They're just big blocks of yellow, blue, and green. That said, the Green Seeker did become a fan favorite. Green is a very popular color. Seekers are pretty popular. Green Seeker becomes popular. I know it sounds like I'm being reductive, but that was the reality. People remembered Acid Storm entirely because they wanted more green Decepticons, and a Green Seeker would really hit the spot. The sheer idea of a Green Seeker was able to hang on in the minds of the designers for nearly 25 years, until eventually we got our very first Acid Storm. Coming out in 2008 in the Universe line, Acid Storm is a repaint of classic Starscream. And for many people, myself included, I think this is the single best deco the classic Seeker ever had. Better than Skywarp, better than Thundercracker, and a ton better than Starscream. I just adore everything about this figure. Let's start with the Jet Mode. The Jet Mode has this wonderful camo color scheme. It looks militaristic and cool. And even if we don't have any media appearances for Acid Storm, the back of the box tells us that he is one of Megatron's greatest soldiers, a genius in the battlefield who uses his acid rain to break down the Autobots. The camo helps convey that. This feels like a Seeker who's used to operating alone, behind enemy lines, a survivor. And then, of course, the transformation is to die for because it's the classic Seeker and it might be one of the best molds ever made. And in robot mode, he still looks great. You now have new, bright hits of yellow, which is able to break up the overall ocean of green. And even if a lot of the camo is now hidden, the fact that there's still so much green and black still convey the idea that this is a soldier of a Seeker. Acid Storm is perhaps the single best repaint in the Universe line. The single best repaint of one of the best molds Transformers has ever produced, and this toy alone was the star-making role for Acid Storm. It wasn't showing up in TV or comic books, it was this figure that made Acid Storm beloved within the fandom. Everything about him brought a new energy to this mold, a new energy to the Seekers. Just the sheer idea that there was someone like this around since the beginning gave people a new appreciation for a lot of the background Seekers. So much so that we eventually got every single one of them on the Classics mold. But Acid Storm was there first. He did it bigger, he did it better, and he is still one of the standout figures of the Universe toy line. It took a few years for Acid Storm to come back, but in 2012, he was given a bot shot, and he was hanging out with Nemesis Prime and Megatron in their own multi-pack. Admittedly, he's now a lot more toxic green than camo green, but it's still the boy. 2013 would be the first year that Acid Storm got multiple releases within the same calendar year. Starting off with the Loyal Subjects, he was included in the Rainmaker's 3-pack, and was even given his own unique expression, having a little bit of a side mouth as if he's talking back to someone but wanted to keep his voice down. He was also given the second name, Acid Wing, and included in the Creon Microchanger line. Overall, he's a very solid looking Creo. I like the green they used. And then we get to something that I don't think anyone could have seen coming. Masterpiece Acid Storm. Admittedly, this toy was one step forward and one step back. On one hand, it was cool that Acid Storm was now given the prestige of other Seekers. Think about this, we got him before we got the Coneheads, and the mold is still solid. That said, by 2013, that solid mold was starting to show its age more and more. People were starting to get really tired of this particular Seeker body. And I think what's even worse is they've ruined his deco. When you look at him in robot mode, you'll notice that the wings look very strange, almost like the camo is now more digitized. But then when you transform him, you realize why. They gave him digital camo! And even worse, only on his wings. The body of the jet is still solid bright green. The original Universe Acid Storm looked good because the camo went over the entire top of the jet. It made him feel unique and stealthy. This just feels half-hearted, and when he transforms, the wings look like they go to a completely different toy. I feel as though Acid Storm should have been one of the standout versions of the Masterpiece mold, but instead, he very quickly went on clearance alongside Sunstorm. This deco isn't ugly, but it's nowhere near as nice as that original Universe version. And unfortunately, this would be the beginning of the enshittification of Acid Storm. It would be more and more and more likely for us to see decos like this, as opposed to the deco that we all fell in love with. I know that sounds really dire, so why don't we pump the brakes right here, right now, and go check out Third Party, because Acid Storm has had a few good figures in the Third Party range. The first Third Party Acid Storm I remember coming across was the Planet X Axis, and I adore this. I'm already a big fan of the War for Cybertron Seeker body, and I think the Acid Storm color scheme looks really solid. It helps that they went with a darker green and gray, making Acid Storm look a little bit more sickly. I think the issue I have with a few Acid Storms is they go a little bit too bright, too Crayola green. I prefer this, the more acidic, sleazy green. That feels better for Acid Storm. If you were looking for a Masterpiece Acid Storm and didn't want to deal with the digital camo, you could always get the Make Toys version of him. Of course, this was when the Make Toys mold was starting to go a little bit off. Nowhere near as bad as it would become. This guy actually can stick together. Just know that this was where the QC issues were beginning to show up on this mold. Which is a shame because there is an argument to be made that this is still the best Masterpiece Seeker body out there. Moving down to the Legend scale, Iron Factory did an Acid Storm. That said, the Seeker body was one of the first things Iron Factory put out. Still solid, but not a patch on any of their more recent toys. Finally, I was really excited to hear that New Age had done an Acid Storm, but look at what they did! It's just the Masterpiece deco! New Age! Baby! Come on! You're usually better than this! Do you have any idea how weird it is to say that I think I prefer a Hasbro Legends over a New Age Legends? But going into 2014, Generations Acid Storm looks pretty nice. I really like this direction. If you don't want to do the camo, I like that you're at least trying to add a little bit more purple and silver to the design. And it helps that the Generations Thrilling 30 Seeker body is very cool looking. It's actually the body that Starscream had back in Infiltration, one of the original IDW designs. And it's translated to a new toy very well. Acid Storm is a good toy. Is he the most complicated transformation or the most articulated figure in the world? No, but he is solid. And funnily enough, he beat Thundercracker and Skywarp to the punch. This was the first repaint of the Thrilling 30 Starscream, and it felt like this was the big coming out party, the moment where we all realized Acid Storm was now going to be one of the go-to repaints. And if they kept going in the direction of this Acid Storm, by giving him a little bit extra color and personality, I wouldn't have complained. Acid Storm would have a few Chotskys in 2016, starting with the Tiny Titans, and I like this guy. He's simple, but he knows what he is. There was also the Alt Mode's Acid Storm. I'm not as big a fan of this guy. I think the green is just a bit icky. That said, Creon Acid Storm also got re-released, and I still think he looks pretty good too. 2018 would be Acid Storm's long-awaited return to television screens, debuting in Cyberverse. And it's worth noting that in Cyberverse, there was a little bit of a mystery with Acid Storm at first. When they were first debuted on Hasbro's website, their bio used he/him pronouns. However, the character, when they first appeared on television, was using a feminine body and was voiced by Jamie Lamchick, an actress. And then later on, Acid Storm showed up again, but this time in the masculine Seeker body. We thought at first that maybe there were two Acid Storms running around, but it was eventually revealed that in the Cyberverse continuity, Acid Storm is non-binary gender fluid, and as a result, they change their body depending on how they feel or identify at that time. It's actually really cool that what was an animation error became core to this Acid Storm's character. They were never a major star of the show, but it was one of the first times that Acid Storm had been given any type of characterization, and it makes them entirely unique to every other Seeker. So for that alone, this is a landmark moment for Acid Storm, a time where they got to be in a league of their own. As much as I like what Cyberverse did with Acid Storm as a character, the Cyberverse toy line really did let me down. I'm not a big fan of the Warrior Seeker body. It's just a bit too gimmicky and can't really hit any note that I like. I do think the Acid Storm colors look the best on this mold, but ultimately, you're painting a very shoddy foundation. I don't think that there's much going on here, and a new color scheme isn't helping that. It would be another big year for Acid Storm in 2019. Keeping with Cyberverse, you could have gone the tiny turbo changer of them. This was also the year that Acid Storm, alongside Ion Storm and Nova Storm, returned to Generations in their Siege 3-pack. And I'm not a big fan of this Acid Storm. I know that this is accurate to the cartoon for them to just be the massive wall of green, but they look unfinished. I just wish that there was anything here. Of course I would prefer the camo, but in a world without the camo, just a little bit of purple or red would go a long way. This is a great mold. I love the Siege Seeker as a robot. The transformation's fun, and I can even get some good work out of the Tetrajet. But when it's just this unpainted hunk of plastic, it's admittedly not all that interesting. At the same time, Acid Storm looks a ton better than Ion Storm or Nova Storm, but that's mostly because we already have a different blue guy, and yellow just never looks as good to me as green does. I was very excited when Takara Tomy showed off their version of Acid Storm that would add a little bit of red to the design, but when the toy eventually came out, it was the exact same as the Hasbro version. It felt like a monkey's paw had been used in order to get Acid Storm more media appearances. I was enjoying what they were doing with the character, but it felt like the toys just kept getting worse and worse. None of them looked like the cool, badass Acid Storm from Universe. Until we get to Flame Toys in 2022. Finally, an Acid Storm that looks sick. I love the two-tone green. I love the hit of red. And of course, I just love the Flame Toy Seeker. It's the most anime-esque of any version of the G1 Seeker body, but Acid Storm wears it so well. I absolutely adore this, to the point that I actually think that this is the best toy Acid Storm has outside of that Universe original. Would I have liked it to come in camo? Sure, maybe. But admittedly, it feels like at this point we've all moved past the camo. So if camo is no longer on the table, at least go this direction, making Acid Storm look dynamic and sick. I adore this toy. Jada Toys also included Acid Storm in their Nano Metafig line, and I actually liked the green they used. Again, that paler, darker green is the type of green I like for Acid Storm. In 2023, you could have gone a Minimates version of Acid Storm that would come alongside the other Rainmakers and Shockwave. That brings us to 2024 and two more big releases for Acid Storm. Starting off with Blockies, you could have gone the Shining version of Acid Storm. This Acid Storm is actually able to light up in the torso and the eyes, and this is still the only way to get Acid Storm in the Galaxy version. And how fitting is it that we end on one of the few big budget Acid Storms ever, because 3.0 is giving us the MDLX Acid Storm. I already love their Starscream, it's one of my favorite versions of Starscream ever, and seeing it in the Acid Storm colors just feels right. And even better, they're using the Flame Toys method. The 2 tones of green, the hits of gray, the little bit of red. This is a dynamic Acid Storm. Is it the Acid Storm I necessarily want? No. Again, I want the camo. But if I can't get the camo, I do think that this is the best Acid Storm has ever looked. And because it's MDLX, it's going to be the best that Acid Storm has ever played. The articulation is next level, it is buttery smooth, it is near perfect. The weapons and all the accessories just give you so much play and posing potential. I think that Acid Storm has finally made their mark in a big way in Transformers. They have very quickly become one of the main Seeker repaints and have constantly proven to give us some of the best looking versions of these bodies. And that's it. Acid Storm is not a particularly deep character. There's not many essays you can write about Acid Storm. Even if you want to look at the entirety of the Rainmakers, they are very much characters that just kind of exist. IDW has done their best to give G1 Acid Storm some love, and of course, Cyberverse Acid Storm is a very unique character, but in neither continuity was Acid Storm ever a premier player. They're very much in the background. Any depth that you give to them is great, because to me, it's enriching the world, but I think everyone has accepted that Acid Storm will never be anything more than what they are. They are a C+ to B- lister. They're someone who most people probably couldn't name, but they would recognize. And if you have a Seeker lineup, it's become increasingly odd to not have an Acid Storm there. That's the best any Seeker could ask for, is to become a repaint that people remember and want. It's something that many of them simply haven't been able to do. Sunstorm, Ion Storm, Nova Storm, Nacelle. So many of them get toys every now and again, sure, but none as consistently as Acid Storm. Outside of the Command Trine and the Coneheads, Acid Storm is easily the most recognizable Seeker. And Acid Storm's also an easier character to get because you don't have to remold them, meaning that it's more likely to see Acid Storm than Dirge, Ramjet, or Thrust a lot of the time. Acid Storm's kind of won at life. They're memorable, but not so memorable as to get boring or passé. When people see Acid Storm, they get excited. People want new Acid Storms. The Green Seeker is someone that people like to remember and like to buy. And at the end of the day, for a character that started off with no name, no voice, and no personality, this is as good as it gets. But guys, I'll ask you, which was your favorite Acid Storm? And is there an Acid Storm you're trying to track down right now? We have quite a few characters to go over during Pride Month. I'm pretty sure the next episode's either going to be Windblade or Archeops. I'm just going to wait and see how that goes. But in any case, if you'd like to support me or the show, I'm on Patreon. $1 will give you access to my Discord server, Moonbase1. $5 will let you watch videos early and download videos directly from me. And $10 will make you a producer. You'll show up in every video I make from now on and be able to make direct Patreon requests. Thank you all so much for watching, and hey, we'll see what we get up to next time.